Let me call to order this meeting of the City of Bloomington Planning Commission for September 14th, 2020. We have one petition that is continued to the October meeting, two items on a consent agenda, and one new petition tonight. But before we get to that, we'll have some minutes to be approved and some reports and resolutions. So let's start with the roll call, and then we'll jump right into those other items.
Hey, Burrell.
Here.
Kate. Cochran.
Here.
Herrera.
Here.
Kinsey.
Here.
Copper.
Here.
Sandberg.
Here.
St. John.
Here.
Listler.
Here.
Enright Randolph.
Muted.
Okay.
All right. 1, 2. Is that everybody?
Well, Beth Kate is going to be a few minutes late, but she will be here, so we'll announce when she's here for the minutes.
Okay, great. All right.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if my name was called.
Yeah, she said it on the. You were the last one she called. Are you here? It sounds like.
Probably why. I wanted to make a quick note. I'm going to step out. The Monroe County Executive Plan Commission meeting is going on, so I'm going to join that call, and then the virtues of Zoom, I'll be able to jump back in. So I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm going to be stepping out temporarily, and I'll join you in a while.
Thanks, Tron.
Great, thank you. Okay, we do have minutes to be approved from the August meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the August 2020 minutes. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Okay, the minutes are approved. We'll move on to reports, resolutions, and communications. Do we have any reports from staff this evening?
Hi, Brad. This is Terry.
Oh, Terry, can I cut you off? I'm so sorry. Terry has one, but I have one first. I was muted. Sorry. Terry?
No, you can't go first.
I have to. Terry, you have to let me.
Yes,
Okay.
it's fine.
This is Terry's last plan commission with us, as you probably all know, which is what she was trying to announce to you before I rudely interrupted her because I forgot I was on mute. Okay, so we got a proclamation from the mayor, who wasn't able to join us this evening, but I am going to read it into the record, and then it'll be presented to Terry later this week. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we may have some comments from a couple of the plan commissioners as well. Okay, whereas Terry Porter was confirmed as Director of Planning and Transportation by this Plan Commission via Resolution RS 1317 on April 17, 2017, and has served as Secretary of this Plan Commission at all hearings since. And whereas Monday, September 14th is Terry Porter's final regular Plan Commission meeting, and whereas Terry significantly contributed to many Plan Commission achievements, including completion of the Comprehensive Plan adopted in January 2018, the update of the Transportation Plan adopted in July 2019, and the update of the Unified Development Ordinance and Conversion Map adopted in April 2020. And whereas Terry's ability to strongly advocate for development decisions that meet the goals of the Comprehensive Plan, such as increasing affordable single-family and multifamily housing, utilizing green building practices, and optimizing street, bicycle, and pedestrian connectivity, has positively impacted this community. And whereas Terry has not only strengthened the Plan Commission, but also has fortified the team in the Planning and Transportation Department by increasing training opportunities for staff and overseeing a much needed physical office update. And whereas furthering her staff's professional development, Terry encouraged team unity by supervising events such as the Office Olympics and providing sustenance in the form of treats not only on rigorous days of competition, but also for holidays, birthdays, and days when someone might just need an extra bagel. And whereas the years of service Terry has dedicated to the City of Bloomington Plan Commission have dramatically improved the city's land use, development, and infrastructure, benefiting our community for generations to come. And whereas for all of her contributions to the City of Bloomington's Plan Commission, we are eternally grateful. Now, therefore, John Hamilton, Mayor of the City of Bloomington, does hereby proclaim September 14th, 2020 as Terry Porter Day. And we have the proclamation, signed proclamation from the mayor, and that will go to Terry later this week. So we just wanted to say thank you for your service, and we're all really grateful for everything you've done for us. And if you have something to say, please feel free. And I think some of the plan commissioners may as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm getting choked up here. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you all for all of your hard work and accomplishments. We've gotten a lot done over the last 3.5 years. It seems longer when I think about how much we've gotten done. But thank you so much for your dedication, your support and service to the community. And then, of course, it's the staff who make all of this happen. It's Jackie and her team, and Beth and her team, and Scott and Neil and his team, and the MPO. Just everyone is so dedicated and works so hard, and it's just been a joy to work with them and with all of you. And it is the hardest part about retiring. I'm very excited about this next phase, but the hardest part is not working with these wonderful people and you all every day. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Terry. I know that there are a few commissioners who probably have something to say. I see a couple hands going up already, so we'll have a few comments here. We'll start with Susan. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, Terry, it's Terry Porter Day, but the day is half done. If we'd have known this earlier, we could have had ticker tape parades and all kinds of stuff. But kudos to you and all of your hard work. It's been a real heavy lift, and you have managed through all of it with grace and professionalism. And for that, we appreciate you. I will soon be joining you on the retirement trail, as you and I have already discussed in another private offline conversations. So you've earned your time off, and enjoy that. And again, you have our gratitude, every single one of us. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Any other comments from any other commissioners?
Yeah, I just wanted to add my appreciation for Terry's commitment. When she came onto this, took on this role, it was, I believe you were thinking about retiring at that moment in time too. So thank you for flunking or being willing to come back and not be retired at your earlier kind of thinking about it. So I just want to thank you for making that what might be a sacrifice in some ways, but you have lent so much professional expertise to this office. And I just have to say how grateful we are for your professionalism, all of the expertise from past governmental experience that you bring to this role. You really just brought so much governmental understanding and how to make things happen that I just don't know if we could have accomplished any of this without your strong leadership. So thank you so much, Terry. You've been an incredible asset to our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? All right, well, I'll add my 2 cents just to say that, Terry, it's been a pleasure to work with you throughout your entire tenure here on the things that we've agreed on, even the things we haven't agreed on. You've always been very professional and easy to work with, and made the process go very smoothly, and you'll be sorely missed. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Brad.
All right. Well, if there are no other comments, we'll move on to any other reports.
Yes, we have another
Steph?
report. Yes, Mike Rouker is going to give an update on the, he is the city attorney. He is going to give an update on the sign amendment package that you've seen earlier this year.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mike Rouker, City Attorney, as Jackie mentioned. I feel like this is very trivial following that up, but so as the Commission may recall, back in June, there were a number of initiatives that were proposed by the Board of Public Works, by the City Council, and of course a motion was passed by the Plan Commission as well, related to a package of measures designed to assist the local community, business community, in coping with and recovering from the pandemic. At that time, all of those measures were set to expire on September 30th, which it may be hard to remember at the end of May or beginning of June, but that seemed at the time perhaps like a reasonable date to sunset those measures. But of course, the pandemic shows absolutely no sign of slowing down. So the City Council will be considering a resolution, or at least a resolution has been drafted for the Council's consideration later this month, to extend the measures they put into place, relaxing certain standards through December 31st of this year. And we are also asking the Plan Commission to exercise its authority under the Unified Development Ordinance to continue to waive sign application fees for temporary and permanent signs through December 31st of this year. If anybody has any questions or wants to sort of go back and recall the conversation we had then, I'd be happy to address those.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rouker. Any questions for Mike? No? I think it would be appropriate then for us to have a motion at this time to extend that waiver.
Move
through
approval.
December 30.
I move approval that we extend the waiver through December 31st.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to extend the waiver of sign application fees for temporary and permanent signs through December 31st, 2020. I think we should call the roll on this one.
Whistler,
Yes.
Copper,
Yes.
Kate, Jackie, can you give Kate co-host ability?
There we go. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Burrell,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Copper. Oh, sorry. Sandberg,
Yes.
St. John.
Yes.
Okay, passes.
Okay, that motion passes. Any other reports, resolutions, or communications from staff?
No, that's all we had.
Any reports from other commissioners? Okay, we will move on to petitions then. We have one petition that is continued to the October 12th meeting. That's PUD 1720. This is the McDowell Business Center petition that we heard last month. So we will not hear that tonight. That will be continued to the next meeting. And I believe, is it just automatically been administratively continued? We don't need to take any action in order to continue that? Or
Correct. They were able to request a continuance.
Okay.
So no action
Excellent.
needed.
All right. We do have two items on a consent agenda this evening. The consent agenda, for those of you who are not familiar, consent agenda is those items that staff has deemed to be non-controversial or that are close enough to the letter of the law that we don't really need to be granting any exceptions. And so we tend to approve those petitions by consent. So there are two items on that agenda tonight, SP-18-20. That's Hillside Manors Holdings, LLC. This is request for site plan approval at 1028 East Hillside Drive to allow the construction of 40 multifamily dwelling units. And then also SP-19-20. This is University Properties, LLC. This is also a site plan approval request for 31 multifamily dwelling units at 301 and 305 East 19th Street. Are there any commissioners who would like to see either of those petitions removed from the consent agenda and placed on the agenda for a full hearing? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on the consent agenda? I see one raised hand.
Yeah, I see one. Just a sec. You should be able to go, Greg.
Hi, thanks. Hi, I'm Greg Alexander. I have comment on both of these petitions. I'll start with the Hillside Drive one, 1028 East Hillside. It's got a lot of parking, basically one per bedroom, which is pretty disappointing to see. But on the other hand, you understand why. It's pretty far south. It's about as far south as you can get and still be connected to grid streets. It's there's not very good sidewalks around there. There's a little bit of sidewalks going east, but you would imagine if any students live there, some of them will on occasion walk to campus, even if they usually drive or ride the bus. On occasion, there will be students. And like the sidewalk situation on Woodlawn or on Park Avenue, it's really disappointing. So yeah, people that live there are gonna wanna drive. But we have just south of the site on Thornton currently it's a unbuilt part of Thornton Drive. I believe it's platted out. The city owns the right of way as far as I can tell. But it's in the transportation plan, it's a future neighborhood greenway. It connects to the Black Lumber rail spur. It's not going to take people to campus probably, though if I was going by bike, I probably would take that route to get to campus. I would take the lumber rail spur and all the way to the Beeline and then take that north to get to campus rather than, there's just a lot of roads that you could avoid fighting with that way potentially, depending, on your mindset. But there should be, I think, a connection to that greenway, even though it's ridiculous, I guess, to expect them to pave out the missing, almost quarter mile of the greenway there. But the way they put the parking, it would almost be in the way of a connection to the greenway. And so I think there should at least be some consideration. How would we stub out to that greenway when it is developed? Switching gears to the 19th Street, 301 East 19th Street project. This is a great project. I love that it's got, about a 40% parking spaces per bedroom. It's so close to campus and there's so much missing sidewalk between it and campus. That's a stunning thing to say, but we've done a lot of development in this area. We've built literally hundreds of new bedrooms in the last 5 years there, and none of them are connected by sidewalk to campus. We're missing sidewalks on Dunn Street between 13th and 17th. We're missing sidewalks on Indiana Avenue, also between 13th and 17th. We're missing sidewalks. We're missing all crosswalks on all sides of 17th and Dunn intersection. We're missing sidewalks. This is about a block and a half from the stadium parking lot where they have the IU bus station. And in that block and a half, we got missing sidewalks on both sides of 19th Street. It's just ridiculous how many sidewalks we're missing. And the good news is for the 1800 North Walnut project, which you guys approved the site plan, I think back in March, that project, they're eventually supposed to install sidewalks along the north side of 19th Street and fill in that gap between there and the bus stop. But that hasn't happened yet. And so people will be living in this, walking in the street. And I think that's really unfortunate. I don't think that's a reason to turn down the project, but it really is. It's just a handicap we keep facing again and again because we aren't building the new sidewalks that we need in really central student neighborhoods. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to comment on the consent agenda?
Janice can go ahead, and then we have another one after this. Or no, we don't. Sorry, getting some messages here. But Janice, you can go ahead.
Janice, are you? We can't hear you. Sorry, Janice. I think we're having. I think you may be having microphone problems. We're not able to hear you. If you'd like to, you're welcome to type your comments into the chat, and we can have those entered into the record. If you're unable to get your audio working.
Where will the parking entrance be for Hillside? On Huntington. No, so there are currently 2 driveways on Hillside for the property that's there now that's vacant. And those will both go away, and there will be an entrance on Huntington. That was the question that Janice typed in.
Okay. Thank you, Janice. Oh.
Are there more? Hold on.
Does look like it said connecting to audio. Maybe.
Oh,
are you
yeah.
with us, Janice? No, we still can't hear you.
I also clarify for Mr. Alexander, I think this maybe answers this question, but I'm not sure. The project will be required to put in sidewalk on the entirety of the Huntington frontage, all the way down to the Thornton right of way. They can request a variance from that if there's some reason that they think they can't build the whole thing. But that is a requirement of the site plan.
All right. Well, thank you, Jackie, for that clarification. Is there any other public comment on the consent agenda? Anything on the Facebook feed?
No, nothing on the Facebook.
Okay, then we are back to the commission, and I think ready for a motion. Would someone like to make a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Do we want to consider these individually, or can we put them both through on the same consent motion?
Yeah, typically what would happen here is just a motion to approve the consent agenda, okay. which would include both of those items.
Yeah, I don't, does anyone want to pull these out at all? If not, I will motion to put both SP 1820 and SP 1920 through on consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Could we please call the roll?
Hopper,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the consent agenda is approved. We are now on to our one petition for a full hearing tonight. This is ZO 20-20, the Standard at Bloomington LLC. This is a request for rezone of 7.22 acres from planned unit development to mixed-use student housing at 301 East Brownstone Drive. The case manager for this petition is Eric Grulich. Is Eric here to present?
Yes, I am here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Excellent. Thank you, Chris. So this is a request for the standard at Bloomington for a property at 301 East Brownstone Drive. This is on the northeast side of town, on the south side of 14th Street. To the east of this site is Dunn Street. The Indiana Railroad tracks runs along the south side of this property. 14th Street runs along the north side. To the north of this, you have a mix of single-family housing within the Garden Hill Historic District, as well as you have the Terra Trace Apartments just to the north of this. To the west, you have some mixed-use commercial development with some multifamily. To the east of this, on the east side of Dunn, you have both the mix of single-family as well as a Duke substation. So this property has been developed with a multifamily apartment complex. This was approved as a planned unit development in the early 1980s. The petitioner is coming forward tonight to rezone this approximately 7.2 acre property from the current planned unit development zoning district to the new mixed use student housing district that was just recently adopted with the new unified development ordinance. So the site, as I mentioned, has been developed with multifamily apartments. There's a private drive that runs throughout the site. Railroad tracks run along the south side. There are no stands of mature trees on the site. There are no sinkholes, no steep slopes. Although the property does have some grade change as you run from the east side to the west side. There's just a little bit over 50 feet of grade change. But it does have a significant amount of frontage, almost 700 feet of frontage along 14th Street. So the east side of the site is significantly higher than the west side of the site. So the petitioners are coming forward tonight to simply rezone the property. So while we do have some exhibits showing the conceptual layout of the property, the renderings of the buildings, the only matter that is really before the Plan Commission tonight, and then probably the next hearing in October, is whether the property should be rezoned to the mixed-use student housing district. So the petitioner would have to still come back for final site plan approval at some point in the future if it gets rezoned. So the only matter that is before the Plan Commission is simply the rezoning of this property. So I'll just kind of briefly go through some of the exhibits that have been submitted, but I just want to reiterate, the only thing that we're really considering is just the rezoning. So this exhibit shows some of the adjacent land uses, which I mentioned are the single-family Garden Hill district just to the north and the multifamily. To the west of this, you've got the mixed-use, medium-use corridor along Walnut and College. You've got the railroad tracks and single-family residences to the south, and then the Duke substation and other multifamily uses just to the northeast of this. So one of the things that I'll just kind of mention is the comprehensive plan that was just recently adopted did highlight the need to locate student housing outside of the downtown. So just to the north of this site, along 17th Street, there is the Evolve project that was approved for student housing. And then not too long ago, earlier this year, there was an approval for the Motel 6 redevelopment that allowed for student housing. So there are two projects that have kind of come forward in the near vicinity of this for student housing. But this site is currently being used for predominantly that use. It is multifamily, it is student oriented. Dunn Street runs along the east side of this site that is extremely close to the IU Stadium where the bus station is. So this site is certainly very unique with the railroad tracks just to the south that buffers this from the single family district. You've got a multifamily project immediately to the north of this. You've got a mixture of uses just to the east of this. So there's a wide range of uses that surround this property. So I'm just going to kind of step through some of the exhibits that the petitioner has shown for the possible redevelopment of this site if the rezoning is approved. As I mentioned, there is some grade change that happens along the site. So this exhibit shows the west side of the site. So this is the single or the kind of one-story portion of the building that would step up to the 4-story, 5-story portion, and kind of continue that elevation change as you move east with the 6 stories along the east side. So the mixed-use student housing district does allow for 6-story buildings. So the renderings and the exhibits that have been shown would meet all of those requirements. But again, as I mentioned, we're not reviewing that. We're just simply using this for kind of illustrative purposes of how this could look. So another exhibit, again, just kind of showing the rendering here, but taking into account some of the adjacent uses and how this would fit in. As I mentioned, the Terra Trace Apartments is on the north side of this site. So in the foreground here, you can see those buildings. Those are 2-story, kind of 3-story in appearance. Just to the south of this and the background of this, you can certainly see the downtown. The railroad tracks are elevated approximately 15-20 feet or so from the ground elevation. So that does buffer a significant view of this project from the neighborhood to the south. But I expect more renderings would be submitted for that when development time comes to the site plan approval. So the site plan would show a series of buildings, three buildings. These would be multi-story buildings. The central building would have a parking garage. There would be an internal drive that would circle around that, as well as 3 connections along 14th Street, and then a possible connection over on Dunn Street that would primarily serve as fire department emergency access. So the site currently has several drive cuts on 14th Street, but as I mentioned, given the significant amount of frontage on 14th Street, the 3 drive cuts that are shown would not be out of character, and help serve to break up the massing of the building as well. So the renderings also kind of show how the building would be broken up with the massing, but I don't want to focus too much on that because again, something that would be developed with the site plan approval. So one other thing that is certainly important to note about this site is access to the Bloomington Transit Service. So 14th Street is on a bus route. It circles around 14th Street to Dunn Street, and then south on Indiana. So the exhibit that you see now is the current bus service plan. There are some changes that Bloomington Transit is looking at making in regards to service to this area. 14th Street is still going to be a corridor along here. So this location along a bus route is certainly ideal for students. The proximity to Indiana University Assembly Hall and the stadium and the bus service just to the north also makes this an ideal location. So this will continue to be served by transit, as well as it has pedestrian corridors along 14th Street. New sidewalks would be installed along 14th Street, as well as along Dunn Street. So one of the things certainly with the rezoning request that has to be taken into account is comprehensive plan guidance. And as I mentioned at the beginning part of this presentation, there are several areas of the comprehensive plan that do address student housing, the location of it, the need to orient that development for students out of the downtown where we've certainly seen a proliferation of that, and to focus that in areas that are closer to campus. And this certainly does accomplish a lot of those goals of the comprehensive plan. The location is appropriate. It's adjacent to multifamily. There is the Garden Hill Historic District to the north, so we'll be coordinating with them when final site plan comes forward for kind of some cursory review of the architecture and comments from them. The petitioners have already had a couple of neighborhood meetings with some of the adjacent residents just to kind of get feedback from them. But again, we'll kind of follow up with that a little bit closer as it comes time for site plan review. So there are certainly a lot of areas of the comprehensive plan that this petition accomplishes. As one of the things that we would be reviewing would also be the affordability and workforce housing component of this. The petitioners have already committed to providing at least 15% of the units that would be meeting that housing goal. Several upgrades to this corridor would also be accomplished with this petition if the rezoning is approved and the site plan comes forward. So there are many areas of this plan and the rezoning request that would accomplish a lot of the goals of the community and the city's approved documents. So we've included the criteria that would be reviewed with the comprehensive plan relevant to this that the UDO requires. We did not make any findings in the report, simply listing these conditions and criteria. So the Planning Commission kind of has that in front of them and they can comment on those. So we are recommending that this petition be forwarded to the second hearing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from commissioners? I guess maybe before we go there, is there anyone from the petitioner who'd like to add anything to that presentation? Eric, do you know, is there a representative of the petitioner with us?
Yeah, I saw Kendall on here, so Kendall should be able to.
I see Kendall, just a sec.
Ah.
Kendall, you should be able to.
Hey, everybody, Kendall Kanoki, Smith Rayab, can you hear me?
Yes,
yes.
We got you.
Great. Yeah, we have a brief presentation to kind of introduce you to the developer and kind of what's planned for the site as part of the rezone, just to augment Eric's presentation. We can keep it very brief if you guys would like to hear that.
Yeah, please continue. The floor is yours.
Okay, do you mind if I share my screen, Jackie?
Yeah, just a second, Kendall. Let me set you up for that.
Okay. And then once I get that shared, we'll have Aaron with the development team, Landmark, to kind of introduce you to the project here. So
okay.
Looks like it's working.
Yep, and Aaron should be set to go.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, just adjusting this. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I just wanted to thank you first for taking the time to meet with us today. My name is Aaron Stange, and I represent the owner and developer of this project, Landmark Properties. Landmark's, we're a vertically integrated real estate company with development, general contractor, and property management divisions. We invest our own cash, and then we build and manage those properties. Our strategy is to develop multifamily properties adjacent to major universities, whereby we cater the design and function of those buildings to attract student renters. Our projects have several advantages for the community that we develop in, including relocating existing renters out of single-family homes, which often improves community relations, and by significantly increasing tax contributions via the redevelopment of often underutilized or blighted sites. Landmark is the largest student housing developer in the United States. We presently have in excess of 9,500 beds across the country. We've got projects nearest to Bloomington, including Urbana, Illinois, Louisville, Kentucky, and Ann Arbor, Michigan, as well as many others, as you can see on this map here. Our projects typically include 24-hour on-site property management and substantial study and leisure space catered to residents. When we began studying this site, we took note of the comp plan policy Eric previously touched on in his presentation. This project is not in the downtown area. It includes diverse housing with substantial affordable component. It's near existing public transit and is adjacent to campus. Our residents will experience better walkability to both the academic core and downtown areas when compared to other student-oriented properties in Bloomington. And so on the next few slides, I just wanted to flip through slowly some of the representative architecture that we've had done on other projects in the past. And from here,
all right, thanks, Aaron, and go ahead.
I was just saying, I was passing it to you, Kendall. It's all yours.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to touch briefly. This is Kendall again with Smith Briab for the record. We have coordinated with the city kind of preliminarily leading up to this point, And so I just wanted to highlight some utility upgrades that'll be done if the rezone and the site plan project are approved, some sanitary sewer and water main upgrades as shown here. Just highlighting this slide again, you know, the walkability component is very important, as that will be the primary routes people will be taking from the development to campus. And it looks like, touching on sidewalk infrastructure, everything is pretty much built out. Depending on where you're headed on campus, it looks like there's pretty much sidewalks already existing. And as Eric touched on, transit connectivity is available nearby. And then one more thing I wanted to touch on is there is a planned bicycle corridor that'll kind of potentially in the future cut through this area here. So we, as part of preliminary coordination, have agreed to dedicate to the city a 20-foot pedestrian and bicycle access easement through the site. And eventually, if that corridor is completed and the rail crossing done and maybe something done through here, that would be a complete rail greenway kind of north-south through the city. So that was something that was very important early on to get coordinated. So we've agreed to do that as well. And just to kind of zoom in on the site a little bit, I'm now going to hand it over to BKV, the architect, to just kind of touch on a few things with the architecture.
Who needs to be unmuted for that, Kendall?
Let's see.
Justin, maybe?
Jack Borman.
Okay.
I think it's up as J-O-B.
Oh, got it.
There you go.
Yeah, hold on. Oh, shoot. Okay, should be able to unmute himself. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. Let me get this off the screen here. Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. All right, great. Okay. Well, if you could go to the next slide, that would, because we've kind of seen this slide several times. In doing the rezoning and doing the massing and the overall design, we spent quite a bit of time walking the site, walking through the commercial area, walking from the university to the site. 14th is obviously a main walking path as well as Dunn. And so we just wanted you to know that we spent a lot of time trying to walk the site and see what the context really was and to see how it connected. Next. So a major part of being able to sort of design this building to fit into the neighborhood well was to look at the grid system with Lincoln and Dunn and that through view corridor off to the residential to the south. And so that was a big part of what this project will be able to achieve as the rezoning is approved. And the key is that we're looking at this as three buildings. They work together as a grouping, but they're all going to be a little bit different brick colors, different siding colors, so that they sort of fit better into the overall scale of this mixed use area. Next slide. This is the view at Dunn and 14th. We have some retail at the ground floor, some amenity space. The basic design is a streetscape ground floor activated level with housing units and amenity spaces and retail, and then three levels of housing above that, with balconies, lots of windows and glass, combinations of brick, panel, siding, and storefront. If you go to the next slide as we walk down 14th. Okay, here shows the three individual buildings, and we were just here at building 3 entry, and as you move through the walk down 14th, there's about 35 to 40 foot of drop. And the 4-story building the building 2 is 4-story with a walkout level, so it's 5 on one end, and then it we drop the entire building down again, and then it's 4-story. And by the time we get down to the far west end, it's 5 stories as a walkout where the amenities at. So this I think shows that we have a cream colored brick on building 3, more of a tan colored brick on building 1, and then more of a neutral palette on building 1. So next, please. This just further illustrates the emphasis on the pedestrian access and walkway along 14th. We have a 20 to 25 foot setback there. We have a series of actual entries to the ground level terraced apartments. There in the center is our leasing office and main central area. You can also see back behind that how we're screening all the parking with housing. So the parking is never visible from the streets. The lower area shows some of the individual terrace units, which would be really create a very nice walkable residential texture. Next, please. Then down at the far west end of the site, we have a 2-level amenity space with 4 levels of housing above that. Everything is screened. We have 2 courtyards that are all internal. So they're all screened from surrounding neighborhood areas, as well as these amenity spaces at the west end of the building. Next, please. This illustrates, and you saw this earlier, about how the 3 buildings are sort of stepping down the hill, opened up between them, so they reinforce the overall grid and view corridor of the neighborhood. Next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there anyone else from the petitioner that would like to add anything, or does that conclude the presentation?
That's all we have for now. We'll be available for questions as well.
Okay, great. We'll go then to questions from commissioners for either the petitioner or for staff. I see Commissioner Cochran has a question.
Okay, so I noticed in Kendall's letter, it talked about, the PUD. So Eric, could you talk about maybe the current uses of the PUD and the recommendation to change the zoning, and maybe some of the uses in the current PUD and some of the reasoning why the changing of the zoning to mixed use student housing?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. So this case was approved in the early 80s. And this is a single-use PUD. So there was no use approved for this site other than multifamily, which if you kind of read through the minutes from that case file back then, it actually started out as a different petition, and the only reason that they made it a PUD at the time was to try to address some of the concerns of the adjacent neighbors that spoke out at that time. So certainly it would not meet any of our standards currently for a PUD. It's not a mixed use. It doesn't have a wide range of things that we're always looking for. So one of the things that we did consider with this petition was simply amending the PUD. However, a lot of the current requirements that are in the zoning code for PUDs, this would not be meeting, meaning mixed use. So what the petitioners are requesting to do with the site is exactly the intent of the mixed use student housing district. They are proposing a single use development that would be following all of those standards. So it really did not make sense to perpetuate the PUD, but to rezone this to exactly the district that would support what they're looking to do.
Okay, I do have one follow-up question. So the proposed height of the new project, what is the proposed height?
So they've got it a maximum of 6 stories, and so that is on the east side of the site. So the height limit in the mixed use district, the mixed use student housing district, is 6 stories, not to exceed 75 feet. So they are meeting that standard. They're meeting all of the setback requirements, the impervious surface, all of the standards of the district they are working to accomplish.
From the architectural drawings, it looks like it's, well under the 75. Is that correct? Or are they tipping out at the 75?
So at the far east end of the site, they're kind of getting really close to that. They're working with the grade change along the site to kind of adjust that massing as you move east towards Dunn Street. But the west side of the site, as I kind of shown on that first slide, was a single story kind of building, stepping up to kind of 3 and 4 stories. So on the east end of the site is where they're getting at that 6 stories, 75-foot height limit.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome.
Okay, Commissioner Sandberg.
Thank you. And I don't know if it was Mr. Stange who made the comment about part of your strategy. I mean, obviously you are a student housing, that's kind of your specialty, but you try to relocate out of single family home areas. Could you speak a little bit about that? And is that just a function of your marketing and as to making these properties more appealing to students, so perhaps they're tempted to leave single family areas into the more mixed use residential areas so close to campus? I think he may need to be unmuted. Aaron Stange.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for asking that question. Yes. So, what I would say is that, when you look at like most students, like our company's actually from Athens, Georgia. Okay. So it's not a town too unlike Bloomington in the sense that, there are a significant number of students in our town. And, when student housing is developed, right, it typically pulls from what we call the shadow market. So in this case, the shadow market is what we refer to as what would otherwise be single family homes that are not owner occupied. And so when you put up a large scale development like this, students like to be around each other. They like to be close to campus. And in this case, I think we're providing a lot of those attractive features for students. The benefit to the community is, look, when owner occupied residents are in the same neighborhoods as student renters, there's sometimes conflict and there's sometimes, maybe not an appreciation of youth for lack of a better term. And so what we see is that oftentimes when a market becomes more developed and there is more purpose-built student housing product, it allows those students to move out of those single-family owner-occupied neighborhoods and into purpose-built product, where they're frankly better managed because of 24-hour on-site management. We oftentimes will have a police officer who's a resident in our building. So I mean, there's things like that I think really enhance the appeal.
Okay, that answers the question somewhat, but again, there's not really an attempt to do any recruiting or marketing. It's just by nature of the amenities you provide, it tends to be that natural draw.
That's correct. Yeah, we're not we're agnostic as to where our students come from to a certain extent. I mean, obviously the goal is for a predominantly, with the exception of a substantial amount of affordable in this project, which would be a combination of workforce and affordable housing. Our student portion, we are agnostic as to where that comes from.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Kinsey.
I have one question about the amenities. I think they were described as facing west. Can you say a little bit more about what's planned for that aspect and how it's integrated with the property that's west, if it is integrated at all? What's the transition there? I guess that's to the petitioner.
Yeah, Jack, is that something you want to answer, or do you want me to take this one? I guess we can't talk at the same time.
No, he just needs to unmute.
Okay.
There he goes. Yeah.
Okay, great. In that last slide on the west side, there was an effort when we talked to the neighborhood groups and sort of wanted to understand kind of their concerns and whatnot. The idea of screening all of the amenity spaces was considered to be important, and we took that to heart. And so that west area, which is the only amenity space that's really at grade, is, at grade that's not incorporated within the buildings, is screened with landscape walls all the way around, so that, and they're above eye level. And then we have plantings along that far west side to kind of buffer it from there, and we have a driveway there as well. So that was our effort to try screening. Pardon?
Yeah, and I'd also just add one other thing here. When we originally studied this concept, we actually had the amenities on the roof, and I think via community feedback, people seem to not be okay with that because primarily of noise projection from an elevated height. And so I think this was kind of one of the approaches that we took to address that concern.
And I would also add that at that one neighborhood meeting, we located the outdoor amenity space at the lowest part of the site because the rail tracks are fairly flat, whereas our site falls off. So there's about a 25-foot embankment there that screens all of that amenity area from the neighbors on the other side of the tracks, plus screening it from the neighbor directly to the west. And you can't see it on 14th either. So.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, Commissioner St. John.
Thanks. I just have two questions. Could you talk about that rail crossing? I think I heard you say that there's a trail that's going to go south across or under the railroad tracks. Did I mishear that?
Yeah, this is Kendall. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So the Grant Street is something that's maybe possibly in the future planned, coordinating with the transportation department. They don't have anything firm yet, but the idea would be you could do a crossing at the rail, whether it's a tunnel or an at-grade crossing. You could continue north. Besides the student or the multifamily housing development directly north of 14th, that Grant Street corridor is pretty much continuous for a very long way. And it's two-way the entire way. It's not one way through downtown, which most of the other streets become one way. So it's just a good candidate for something like that. And even though they don't have a concrete plan at this time, they wanted to plan for the future, even if it's 10, 20 years out. So that's kind of the idea behind the rail crossing there.
Okay. Great, thank you. And then my last question, and I don't know if this is for Eric or Kendall, but could you just say a little bit more about the 15% workforce housing? Is that a commitment? Is that a maybe? Is that a...
I can speak to that, or Eric can, but I'll jump in. This is Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager. It's actually 15% of beds. I think we said units, but it's actually beds, which is an agreement that the developer and the administration came to before the new code was put into place. So we've talked extensively about it with the legal department because that doesn't meet the new code requirement exactly. But the agreement was made, and there could be a very strong argument for the fact that that was vested because they worked on it for so long. So it is 15% of beds, and then the developer, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, does get to choose the makeup of what types of units they use to meet that requirement. Whereas in the new code, it's required to meet the percentage. So if you have, half one beds and half two beds, then any contribution has to meet that half and half. So that was agreed to before the filing even happened. So that will go forward as a condition of approval. And just to clarify, because I know there are some design questions, and when we see projects like this that come in that are, so far down the road, we do try to clarify, but it does get a little muddied, that this is just the rezone portion. So you all are just looking at whether or not this is an appropriate area for mixed student housing. It is helpful to see what project they intend to build. Were they to not build this, someone else could come forward with a project that meets UDO requirements for that zoning district. And it's different than what you've seen, I think, in other places where we've done PUDs, where they're not setting any of their own standards. So height and massing and impervious surface, all those things will have to meet what we've already agreed to last year to put into the new code. So they will be held to all of that. And you will see it, of course, But just as a clarification, not to anything you specifically said, Karin, but just because I'm already talking. But yes, it's back to your question specifically, it's 15% of beds. And that is an agreement that will go forward with the rezone and be required because they have offered that and already worked it out with the administration.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That helps, that clarification, because that does seem to be part of thinking about a rezone too a little bit since it was mentioned, and it's important to our community. So I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Any other questions from commissioners? Let's see. Commissioner Sandberg has a question.
Thank you. There has been mention of some meetings that you've already had with the surrounding neighborhoods. Could I ask specifically, and there may be some people in the Zoom room tonight that may speak up from the Garden Hill neighborhood, the ones that's perhaps going to be most impacted by this, if there's been any particular concerns or complaints that have already been addressed before we get to this point to talk about the rezone. I don't know if that would be for administration or if it would be for the petitioner.
Last year had 2 meetings, about a month, 2 months apart. That was sent out to both the Garden Hill district to the north, as well as the old Northeast neighborhood on the south side of the railroad tracks. The first meeting, I'd say there's probably 10 or 12 members of the adjacent neighborhoods that came to speak. And then again, at the second meeting, a lot of those same neighbors came out again, just to kind of see. And so the purpose of those meetings was the first meeting was just to kind of get an interest from the neighborhood of what were their concerns. What did they want to see? What did they not want to see? And they took those ideas, they went to the drawing board, came up with some basic kind of massing models, site plans, and then came back again a month or 2 later and showed those again to the neighborhood to see if that was kind of in line with the comments and the thoughts and the concerns. Those seemed to be very productive conversations and meetings. So the petitioner had just kind of been working on things in the background for several months and came forward to file a month ago to kind of formally initiate the process now that they'd had those informal meetings with the neighborhood.
Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to public comment. If you are here from the public and you wish to comment, just in the participants tab, click on that little button at the bottom that says raise hand, and we'll unmute you and recognize you. When you're called on, please state your name for the record, and then you'll have up to 5 minutes to make comment. So,
okay,
Becky,
Greg. Yeah, we've got Greg first, I think. Mr. Alexander, you can go ahead.
Great. Thanks. I'm Greg Alexander. I'm really excited to see that we're switching a PUD to an existing zoning type, the MS zone. We should really get rid of all of the PUDs in town. I'm just gonna be an absolutist about that. It was a mistake to allow so much of the city to be developed without uniform standards, and it's good to see that's being rectified. I think, one of the reasons this project makes so much sense is that it's replacing existing student housing, Brownstown Terrace. But that draws attention to a displacement problem. And I know we don't care about students. We just look at them as a burden, right? But this existing student housing is relatively affordable. It's between $400 and $700 a month per bedroom. I just looked as if I was renting. And that's a valuable thing in our community, that if the only place people are allowed to build new student housing is where there's existing old student housing, then we're going to have this pattern more and more often where the relatively affordable large number of bedroom units that we have, and we already had this with Dunhill just across 17th Street from this development. And I don't know a great solution for that, but we need to preserve some of these older buildings, even though they're kind of crappy, because they are affordable. And this new building, there's no way this is not going to be an affordable building for a long time. of course, I got to talk about sidewalks. We are missing so many sidewalks in this neighborhood, guys. Like, to get to campus, you have to cross the railroad tracks. And for some reason, we haven't been able to get the railroad to maintain vegetation that hangs on the sidewalks. So like 13th Street, where it runs parallel to the railroad track, vegetation is always obstructing that sidewalk. Indiana Avenue, where it goes under the railroad tracks, there's always vegetation hanging over those retaining walls blocking the sidewalk. Walnut, where it goes under the railroad tracks, there's always vegetation hanging down blocking the sidewalk. And the city is unwilling to do anything about it. The railroad is unwilling to do anything about it. And I almost say we should just not build any student housing north of the railroad tracks until we figure out how to maintain a pedestrian crossing across the railroad tracks, because there's not a single one in the whole city that's even remotely clear most of the time. The one that I live on Madison Street, it's blocked again. Believe it or not, they only clear the vegetation once every summer, sometimes twice, and that's just not enough. And that's a really big problem. The situation is so bad that for a long time, students used to cross the railroad illegally at Dunn Street. They'd kind of afforded a crossing through a gravel pit there that crossed the railroad. And that was a very popular crossing. I used to walk on that railroad with my kids. And every time I did, I would see multiple students coming from the Brownstone Terrace to campus across the railroad tracks illegally. Well, they fenced that off, and you can't do that anymore. There's no crosswalks on Dunn. There's no crosswalks on Indiana. There's no sidewalks on Indiana going northbound. And why would you go northbound? Because there's the bus station. The campus bus station is at 17th and Dunn, basically. And I've read U reports. Students actually, they come here and they're not engaged in our community. And even so, they figure out how to interact with city government to say, there's no sidewalks between my apartment at Brownstone Terrace and the bus station just 3 blocks away. And that's just such a long-standing problem. And we're building just, literally, if we build this, it'll be on the order of 1,500 bedrooms in the last, 5 years. That are going to suffer from this one section of missing sidewalk on Dunn, and it's just absurd. Speaking of absurd, 681 parking spaces. My God, I mean, if they want to build empty parking spaces, I guess I can't stop them, but I kind of wish you guys could. And one other issue about College and Walnut is, it sounds like they're looking at a couple storefronts, commercial storefronts, and I love that. That's 3 blocks from my house, and I would like to think that I might go to that store, but the fact of the matter is that Walnut and College are highways, and I don't like walking across them. I have to sometimes, but I'm going to be really reluctant to visit that store, even though it is so close to my house, because Walnut and College are such a prohibitive environment for pedestrians. And the transportation plan, the draft transportation plan that staff prepared for you, said we need to calm Walnut and College. And you guys, you jerks, you took that out. So put that back in the plan. You don't need to sabotage every commercial development along this corridor to pedestrian access. You can say we should redesign College and Walnut. Thanks so much for your time.
Great.
I know you don't really think we're jerks, right?
He doesn't.
But I wanted to be on the record.
Yeah. Brad, we had one more gentleman that I know wanted to speak. He asked me earlier how to do it, and looks like maybe he got booted. So I'm just saying it now in case he comes back. I might ask you if it's okay if he speaks, but I don't see any other hands at this time.
Okay, yeah, certainly if there's someone who's having technical difficulty, we'll do our best to accommodate them. Is there anyone else who has not made themselves known yet? Again, if you want to give comment, just click on participants at the bottom of your screen and then click on the raise hand button at the bottom of that tab, or just turn on your camera and wave your hands furiously and we'll probably see you. Not seeing any. Okay. Well, we'll come back to commissioners then for any additional questions or final comment or a motion. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I have one, just to talk a little bit about Greg Alexander's comment about the sidewalks. And I mean, I think we're all in favor of trying to get more passable walkways. So I don't think we're opposed to that. It's just kind of how to make it happen. And I wonder if we could just talk about that right now just to get it out. And I realize that's not part of the rezone request, but we may as well have a conversation about it since he raised some of the issues. Does the petitioner or Eric, do you want to address anything with the sidewalk issues and maybe even the rail crossing question?
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen here. So the rail crossing, that's an extremely complicated issue. The railroad is very protective of any crossings. They certainly don't want any more. They don't want to encourage pedestrians in that area. For vehicular connections, at least, any additional vehicular connection that you want, you usually have to get rid of at least one, if not two, other connections somewhere else. So working with the railroad is very difficult to say the least. There are sidewalks currently along the south side of Dunn Street and along this property frontage. The petitioner is certainly going to be upgrading both pedestrians connectivity along 14th and Dunn Street, 10-foot sidewalks at the very least with tree plots. We're looking at possible connections along the railroad to the south, east-west through this site as well. Off-site improvements are not required with rezonings, but rezonings are certainly discretionary. That is certainly something that could be discussed, but is not a requirement. One of the biggest problems with off-site improvements always is right-of-way to work within. If there are connections that can be done, we can certainly discuss those further. Anything that is adjacent or on this property frontage is fair game. Anything beyond that is a little bit harder in terms of discussion and can't be required. But we're always able to look at those improvements. But there are some gaps here, certainly. But the petitioners can't always fix everything that is adjacent to a property, especially if it's a significant distance away. But they can certainly fix and are required to bring a property into compliance along their frontages.
If I could add as well, this picture is kind of old. I'm gonna show you something. Hold on. Related to the railroad crossing, I think you can see this screen. So the railroad crossing, you can't see it very well in this aerial, but in the old aerial that Eric showed, I think the weathered walking path is adjacent to Lincoln, I believe, or coming off the end of Lincoln. And actually, a third-party developer owns property on either side of the railroad, immediately on the other side of Lincoln, meaning that there's only so much we can ask of this developer and get something done. So this developer only has frontage with the railroad in this area here, because the railroad decided to sell off portions of their kind of unusable land, which you can kind of see to go highlighting here when I move the mouse. So originally we had internally been discussing what sort of things the transportation plan requires related to site plans and rezones, and that, what the rail trail expectation was here. And we did have those discussions, and they're important. And then, but a kind of a something that was in the back of that was that it kind of is a moot point for this project because there's such a small area that is adjacent to the railroad. When you think of Brownstone Terrace, you're thinking it's the entirety, of the south side, but it really isn't. It's just this portion here. So I do think they're exploring crossing, and maybe with the third party, I'm not sure, those people would obviously have to be involved. But that's kind of something that I think is maybe more long-term than we initially anticipated. Just to add that in there, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. I suspect this will continue to be an issue as we look at site plan. So thanks.
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Commissioner Kinsey's question. And Jackie, thank you for that explanation. So just to clarify, these are mostly students who are going to be moving east or southeast towards campus in terms of walking. So they can get even if I would love that if that new crossing was built at the railroad, but even if that's not, they can still take the Indiana and walk underneath there. People do that all the time. Okay.
Yes,
and then
that's
also,
certainly a very heavily traveled pedestrian corridor along the
yeah,
down to
and then
10th
you just
Street.
yeah, and then you just go 4 blocks from the east side of that property, 4 blocks, and there's a sidewalk. You have to jog, I think, on 13th, but it takes you to Woodlawn, which is brand new, huge path that takes you directly into the center of campus. So I would love there to be a sidewalk on the south side of 13th, and I would love for all the sidewalks to be fixed done, because I agree with the public, Mr. Alexander's comments, but I think there is some pretty nice connection not too far, 4 blocks on 13th Street to get you to a major entry into campus. So I just wanted to add that on to Commissioner Kinsey's comments.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? Questions? Are we ready for a motion? As a reminder, the staff recommendation is that we continue this to a second hearing at our October meeting.
I move that we continue case ZO 2020 to a second hearing at our October meeting.
Second.
Uh-oh, we had a race for the second there. Who won?
Jillian.
All right. Commissioner Kinsey seconds. All right, any final comment before we call the roll? All right, we are ready to call the roll on the motion to continue this to our October meeting.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John.
Was that St. John?
Yes.
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Copper,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, so the motion passes. That petition is continued, and that is our final agenda item for the evening. Highly unusual, but we're going to adjourn before 7 p.m. here. And thank you all, and thanks again, Terry, for all of your service. And we'll see you all in October.